Hello, today I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on the David Fincher directed movie Zodiac, which was released in 2007. I saw this movie when it was released and I enjoyed it. Um, you know, it's got all the solid Fincher touches, but I didn't really see it for how special it was. I don't think I really understood that in its entirety at the time. Um, and I watched it, I think, once or twice in the interim, but last night I saw it again. And there are things that I think are worth talking about concerning this movie. First of all, like on the subject of the Zodiac killer, who he is in real life, and this is putting aside the artistry of the movie or anything pertaining to the movie as a piece of cinematic art, but the subject matter about about Zodiac and the Zodiac killer is one of those things that I've come to have a bit of doubt concerning the official story. But that's just like the older I get, the less I believe anything that I'm told. So I guess pretty soon I'm just not even going to be believing my own eyes, which is probably not something I should believe because we're living in the age of AI, right? Um, but certainly nothing out of the respectable media or their cronies is to be trusted. So there's a lot going around about who the Zodiac really was, whether it was just one guy, whether it was many men, and whether they were all part of a cult. That's an open question, and it's not a question that the movie really investigates that fully. Although the one character who I guess it comes the closest to being the hero, and that's the one they call a Boy Scout, who works for the San Francisco Chronicle as a cartoonist, but who has this interest in being able to decode what are they called? Decode things that are written cryptically, like with symbols or whatever, and those are of course the letters that they get, or several of the letters that they get from this supposed Zodiac. And he winds up this character winds up devoting much of his life, years of his life, to finding to trying to crack this case, even though he's not the police, even though he's not really even a reporter. He works with somebody else, Robert Downey Jr. In at the San Francisco Chronicle, and in the movie they come to know each other and sort of strike up a friendship. It's my understanding that they never struck up a friendship in real life, but certain artistic liberties are taken from time to time in anything that's a true story or based on a true story. He gets deeper and deeper into it, and as the years go by and the case goes cold, it's still front and center in his mind, to an unhealthy extent, to the extent that he winds up alienating his family, and separating from his wife, who just can't handle his obsessions anymore, and the sometimes the poor choices that he makes, being motivated by just this monomania of catching the Zodiac, finding who the Zodiac is. But at one point, he's saying, he kills. The kills tend to come during days of occult significance, and so he's going down that road of looking at the dates, considering what esoteric significance this particular date has, or how it's was an ancient pagan uh, day of celebration, and it's still probably celebrated by certain people in our hierarchy, in the power hierarchy of the Western world, including the United States. So it's part. So he goes down all kinds of rabbit holes, but the movie never really commits to anything, and that's actually to its credit, because the Zodiac killer is never was never discovered in real life. What we end up getting are two possible suspects, and one suspect seems more like we're steered to believe that one suspect seems more likely than the other, but it's also possible that neither one of those are the Zodiac actually. So so what can I say about the movie? This movie has a look and a feel to it that is extremely authentic. Fincher just pulled out all the stops, trying to recreate. It's mostly in San Francisco, trying to recreate the San Francisco that existed from 1969, up through the 70s. I think the final. I think the story closes in 1981, or that's the final thing that we see. So it's over the period of a little more than a decade. But as far as the costumes, as far as the way offices looked, the kind of suits that men wore to work, it was all very, very authentic, and it really puts you back in that world of that era. So I would define this movie as a meta procedural. A procedural storyline is something typically like Law and Order on television, which has had a long life on television. I haven't watched it that much, but I'm aware of it as a cultural phenomenon. And I know a lot of people like it, because or just like the whole procedural way of telling the story. It's very formulaic, and I think there's a certain comfort that can be derived from that. It's sort of like, yep, another day at the job, and then you get the policemen come in and find the person who's been murdered, and then the suspect is arrested, and then it goes over to the lawyers, and they talk to one another, and it's sort of that's what's known as a procedural. And there's a lot of aspects to this movie, Zodiac, which are similar to the procedural. There's a lot of terse dialogue. There's like, what do we call it? Cop talk? I don't know. And I should say that it's really interesting, as someone who doesn't like cops particularly much in real life. I find that in the movies, I always think the cops are pretty cool. Like, especially in movies like this, when they're just single-mindedly out to catch this killer, and they're just like, while they're on a stakeout, they make little sort of glib, hard-boiled, cynical wisecracks to one another. And they've got this kind of rapport. The main cop in the movie and his buddy, his partner, on the beat. They've got, and it's the character in this movie is the one that was supposedly both Steve McQueen's Bullet and Clint Eastwood's Dirty Harry were modeled after. So he's like a tough, no nonsense, macho kind of guy, and the dialogue is just so. I can't speak highly enough about the how hypnotic it is, and like there's there's a wit to it. There's an understated quality to it. You know, people sometimes people get mad or pissed off, but there's very little shouting, and it's all sort of grim talk. Sometimes very funny, sometimes quite amusing. Also, the relationship in the movie between Robert Downey Jr.'s character and the Boy Scout cartoonist is also a very amusing, buddy kind of thing that forms. So what I mean when I say this is a meta procedural is it's got those aspects of the procedural, including the kind of dry, laconic dialogue that I've referred to already. But it goes beyond it's beyond that, because a procedural just is about okay, we there's a crime, we find the killer, who we think the killer is, and take him to court, and you plea bargain, and this happens and that happens, and then it ends the way however it ends. It doesn't always end happily. Sometimes the bad guy gets away. Sometimes he doesn't get as much of a sentence as he ought to get. But again, there's a certain comfort to it. It's like just staying within these parameters and sticking with this formula, even though the stories are different from show to show. Essentially, it's the same formula. And there's nothing really deep about it. It's not asking questions like, what's up with the depravity of man? Why do men become evil? Why do men become serial killers? Could it be part of an intelligence operation like MK Ultra? Could it be related to all of that? Those kinds of questions are not examined. It's sort of a just the facts man. But this movie, while it has all of many of the earmarks of a procedural, it also asks those kinds of questions, because and this is where I think there are certain things about the movie that I can understand people being. I don't remember hearing that this movie was terribly controversial, but there are aspects to this movie that I would definitely think some people might have a problem with, and the most dicey thing to me is the way that they meticulously recreate the scenes where Zodiac murders his victims, and so we see this. We see actual people, actors playing people who were actually there, getting shot relentlessly several times, getting stabbed. There's a cab driver whose actual name is used, who gets shot in the back of the head abruptly. And if I'm related to those people, I don't think I necessarily want to see those scenes. And I guess there's something that threatens to be cheapening about actually showing those scenes. On the other hand, I guess one could maintain that this is how you honor these people and honor the way that they were forced. Their unfortunate end, the unfortunate end of their lives is to commemorate it on screen, and to show thus that they are remembered, that they haven't been forgotten. I don't know. I see how that could be, a somewhat dicey thing. Now, the film also definitely lets us feel the sort of mystique of the serial killer. That it allows us to find him fascinating, to find him somewhat hypnotic and intriguing. Why does he do it? What's he going to do next? He writes all kinds of threatening letters. saying he's going to shoot up a school bus in one, and the paper has to decide, do we let the general public know about this or not? Is this going to be, is that a responsible thing to do, or should we keep some things from the public? I'm very much, as you know, I'm very much in favor of open records. I don't believe in confidentiality. I don't think the government has any, or newspapers for that matter, have any. That there's any reason, any legitimate reason, why they would keep things from us. I can understand making exceptions here or there with little things, but not with the broad picture. So this movie, like Seven, which Seven is a much more in your face, like gore, torture, and heading towards this horrific ending that you'll never be able to wipe from your mind for the rest of your life, how you felt in those final 5 minutes when the terrible final twist is revealed. That this movie is not quite like that. It's quite a bit more laid back in its style, and longer. It's less of a thriller per se, thriller / horror per se, and again, more of a procedural. That said, or meta procedural. Now that said, there are some scenes that are very horrific that could easily be a part of any horror movie, and people have talked a lot about the scene in the basement, and I'm not going to give anything away, but that scene is something where if you watch it, you're like, oh my God, get out of there, and he's getting out of. Once he puts a couple things together and thinks to himself, this guy, there's something wrong here, something doesn't smell right here, and he eventually has to make a break for it and run out into the rain. And there are a couple other scenes like that are very tense. The atmosphere, though, is much more has much more in common with actual 70s movies. If you go back and watch movies in the 70s, you see, it's kind of a throwback in even in casting and so forth. There's no affirmative action casting in this movie. In fact, it's pretty damn white. I think it's almost all what the cast, both the main cast and the minor characters who appear, are just about all white. And of course, it reflects reality in that sense. The San Francisco Chronicle, like the bigwigs at the paper were older white guys, and so that's what they show us. There's nothing. I always, it seems like a pretty small thing to praise a movie about being historically accurate in that sense, and not being not and resisting the urge to insert some ahistorical aspect in order to hit the quota system that they're pushing for movies these days. Authenticity seems like it's a big thing for someone like Fincher, and in this movie, he really gives us so many great touches that lets us feel like, the past is another country. I don't know if that's an actual quote from somewhere. I think it is, but I don't know who said it. And it's true. Things felt different in the past. People talked different in the past. Styles of movies were different in the past. Movies in the 70s could be slower and more meandering and more laid back and not so much in your face. One thrill after another. And this movie manages to capture that aspect of the times. Fincher, like Scorsese and like Tarantino, is very good at using pop songs to enhance the mood of what's going on in the story. And it's the choices that he makes, the kind of songs that he opts to use in different scenes are quite quite right on, right on the money. Particularly what becomes basically the theme song for the Zodiac Killer himself. That's the song "Hurdy-Gurdy Man" by Donovan. Now, the song itself is kind of a little corny, but but it also has this kind of powerful, like just powerfully ominous sense about it. And I think the hurdy-gurdy man is supposed to be death. I think that in the song, the hurdy-gurdy man is supposed to represent death, and that's where that mythology comes from. That was used by Donovan in that song. Now, in the movie, it's extremely effective, and so you see this movie and you associate hurdy-gurdy man with the Zodiac Killer, just like when you see Reservoir Dogs, Stuck in the Middle with You gets associated with a torture scene, and all kinds of examples like Scorsese and Goodfellas, like the Layla, the coda of Eric Clapton's Layla is when all these bodies are uncovered. That's always stuck with me. When they can take songs, and it's also really cool when these are songs that are not necessarily top tier or not necessarily the biggest hits of the time, but that they were around at the time, but maybe you haven't heard them for a long time, or maybe if you weren't alive back then, you haven't heard them ever. That takes a certain kind of skill to know which pop songs to utilize. And even like in Fight Club, of course, "Where's My Mind" by the Pixies always has that. You can't I can't hear that song without thinking about how Fight Club ends with the crumbling buildings, and Edward Norton and Helena Bonham Carter holding hands as the buildings explode around them. And same applies here to Zodiac. In the end, of course, the Zodiac Killer remains a cipher, just because he remains a shadow, just because he was never arrested, and we don't know for sure who he was or if there were more than one of them. I think a while ago I did a review, or I talked about the Netflix series called Sons of Sam, which was about how that particular case in the late 70s, where a serial killer was on the loose, shooting people in New York City, and the guy they arrested was many think just used as a scapegoat, that it was like a cult, and and powerful people were involved, and there were other many shooters, not just this one guy. He was involved. David Berkowitz, I think, is his name, but there were many other people that were involved that where this never came out. Maybe those things can't come out because there's too much. They have too much power and sway. The people who these dark people who occupy positions of power and do things, like this for their own sick, fucked up reasons. Go murder people as part of some sick ritual. And I think Zodiac, what Son of Sam is to the East Coast and New York's, that Zodiac is the same to San Francisco and the West Coast in many ways. He liked to communicate with the local media by sending them letters, talking about his mindset, and he would call, after he committed a murder, he would call the police and say, I'm the murderer, and I killed these two people, and you can find them at wherever kind of place. So he's obviously getting some thrill off of, staying one step ahead of everybody. So this is my belated review of Zodiac. I think because I hadn't felt inspired to talk about it before, but now it just seems like I've realized how great of a movie it is. It's still not my favorite among my favorites of Fincher's canon, but it's up there. It's close to the top three, which I would say are number 3, The Game, number 2, Seven, number 1, of course, Fight Club. This might be fourth, maybe fourth or fifth. I don't know. I'd have to think about it some more when doing my rankings of Fincher films. Anyway, if you've seen it and you've got any thoughts on the subject, please leave your comments below. And thank you for watching.